everyone. Welcome to Stinchfield. As the mainstream media wants to focus on President Trump and him pleading not guilty today to those overreaching charges, the latest ones that were filed, there's another story that I want to talk about, a story that is oddly missing from the headlines. And if the mainstream media does cover it, it's buried in the back pages of newspapers or in the bottom of newscasts. Very, very strange. There is apparently a Chinese biolab that was found just outside of Fresno, California. Authorities there say it was illegally operating with thousands of mice that were infected with things like HIV, E. coli, malaria, hepatitis, pneumonia. You name it, the list goes on. Who was operating this lab? The name that comes out is a company called Prestige. But was it tied to the CCP? No one knows. Sure, the Chinese Communist Party clearly plays a role in any company that is of Chinese origin, which we are told this company is. The local news out there covered it. Watch this.
Once inside, no staff was located, but
there was a special room that was built housing about 1,000 mice, 1,000 white lab mice.
And the reason the mice were in the lab was jaw-dropping.
Through their statements, that they were doing some testing on laboratory mice there that would help them support developing COVID test kits that they had on site.
Documents show the lab was also being used to produce pregnancy tests. 200 of the nearly 1,000 mice were already dead.
You have to ask what's going on. COVID tests? What do you need malaria for? What do you need pneumonia viruses for? All kinds of human blood and fluids found. All discovered because of a garden hose. This is how ridiculous California is, by the way. You've got this, what by all accounts is a nefarious lab operating with all kinds of biohazards in it, and authorities see a garden hose coming out the back. Who would have an illegal garden hose in their warehouse? That's how they discovered this in California. Well, they go to investigate the garden hose, and lo and behold, they find this lab that is up to who knows what. So there's one in Fresno that we know about. How many more of these Chinese biolabs are there around the country? It reminds me of the secret police station. We learned of one in New York City, and then as word started to get out, we learned that there were quite possibly dozens upon dozens of these Chinese secret police stations across the country. So Prestige Biotech is a Chinese-run company, which led this city councilman to say this about the event.
On March 16th, the representative from the company, Prestige Biotech, potentially a China national, informed investigators, quote, "These mice were genetically engineered to catch and carry the COVID-19 virus," end quote. Prestige Biotech, that company, is licensed in Nevada, not California. One address listed for this company is a vacant building in Las Vegas. Substack reports that other addresses related to this company appear to be in China, though this can't be verified at this time.
Which leads everybody in a state of wonderment. What was this lab up to? We know that the Chinese Communist Party looks at genomics, looks at bioweapons, as a way to, at some point, wage war on the world. I believe that's what the China virus was all about, the coronavirus, COVID-19. Gary Bredfeld is the city councilman you just saw there. He raises these questions, too, and he raises an issue about what is so close to this lab.
Lemoore Naval Air Station is only 45 miles from this illegal lab. As was reported in Substack, quote, "All of the F-18s for all the Navy's West Coast space carriers are located at Lemoore. The F-18s are primary strike fighters for the United States Navy. In a war with China, these are the aircraft that we would rely upon to sink Chinese naval vessels and give us victory," end quote. The implications from the spread of a debilitating virus could be devastating to our nation's military readiness.
You understand that's a city councilman. Why isn't the United States Congress talking about this incident? They do talk about China. They do talk about genomics. Why aren't there more reporters out there from the national news media saying what in the world is going on? Could this have led to a potential attack on America with these viruses. It certainly seems that federal law enforcement should be investigating all of this. You know, the Chinese Communist Party, as I mentioned, has a long history with genomics, using DNA, trying to engineer DNA to make super soldiers. There's a company called U.S. Beijing Genomics, U.S.-based Beijing Genomics. Beijing Genomics was the subject of a congressional hearing not long ago. This is Congressman Dunn. Watch this.
Beijing Genomics, the world's largest genetic research company, has a U.S. subsidiary called Complete Genomics. It is rapidly making inroads in the United States marketplace for commercial genetic sequencing. More concerning, several of these firms, including BGI, have been implicated in human rights abuses, research with the PLA, and blatant disregard for patient privacy. You may be familiar with the findings of a 2021 report by Reuters that showed China's BGI group was using prenatal tests developed in collaboration with their military to collect genetic data on pregnant women.
So they take those prenatal tests, and apparently the leftover samples could be used for DNA testing. I saw one report that had a box you check to approve or not approve. And in the fine print, it says, if you leave the box blank, we take that as an approval to use your DNA. So BGI, I should say, rejects any connection to the PLA, that's the People's Liberation Army, and China. But I will tell you that Reuters, the outlet that the congressman was just talking about, said that BGI had a contract with the PLA to work on altitude sickness and ways to engineer where people would not get altitude sickness for the rapid ascent of mountains. Are they trying to make super soldiers? Probably. That would be my assessment of all of this. And then I found this clip from our buddy over at War Room, Steve Bannon. He had Bill Gertz on, talking about China's ultimate goal, and they'll do anything to control the human body and control their enemy. Listen.
And the reason these sanctions were imposed is because these institutes are working on what the Commerce said was brain control weaponry. Now, think about that for a second. This is weapons that can control people's brains. That means it's either biological, cognitive, or informational, or all three. So they're working on high technology weapons that can actually influence the brain. They can fire directed energy that can have an impact, a certain specific impact. It can change your cognitive ability.
And add that to their genomics situation and studies, and you have a recipe for disaster on the stage. I am convinced that China released the virus on the world, at least allowed it to spread purposefully. They don't care. They know. Our friend Miles Guo at the new federal state of China basically said that China was willing to unleash viruses and this bio war to get their way of ultimate control of the world. Is that what was going on in this lab? Who knows? But we better be investigating, because it doesn't look good. Well, joining me now is the author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War. Our friend Gordon Chang is back with us. Gordon, good to see you.
Thank you so much, Grant.
Gordon, you just wrote an article about this. What is your assessment of what was going on in Fresno, California?
I think this was a Chinese lab that was intending to send out pathogens around the U.S. Remember, those 1,000 mice were genetically engineered to carry pathogens. And so when you look at all of the facts regarding this lab, and there are a lot of them, and yeah, there is a little bit of a mystery to it, but we know enough to be alarmed. And we have to assume that this was not the only facility, as you talked about. There must be others around the United States as well, which means that China is intending to release a disease from American soil intending to kill Americans.
You know, what I have to laugh, because China says, oh, no, we don't do any bioengineering. We don't do any genomics. 1984, they passed some law. Yet they cloned a baby, and then they put the scientist in jail, making a big show to the world. Oh, we're going to jail the scientist that did it. I don't buy any of their rhetoric when it comes to stuff. I think they know exactly what they're doing, Gordon.
Of course they know what they're doing, because China runs a near total surveillance state. And that professor that you talked about was working in a major university in Shenzhen, and he's the first person to genetically edit genes that led to a human birth, in this case, twins. Now, those twins, he said, were modified in order to make them HIV resistant, but researchers also say that they were modified to make them more intelligent than the normal human being. So, you know, your point about super soldiers is absolutely right. And by the way, this thing about complete genomics, the United States allowed China to buy complete genomics in, I think it was 2012 or 2013. And now China has the biggest collection of DNA profiles of Americans. So we know what they're doing. They're hoovering up our DNA because they're going to use that to develop what are called specific ethnic genetic attacks. In other words, pathogens that will leave the Chinese immune but kill everyone else.
All right, so RFK Jr. took a lot of heat for making that claim about the COVID virus. But China is fully capable of trying to concoct something like that, Gordon, as you just spelled out.
Yes, in 2017, the Science of Military Strategy, which is an authoritative publication of China's National Defense University, actually talked about these pathogens that are specifically targeted on foreigners. So clearly we know the Chinese are doing this. There's researchers talk about this openly in public. And, you know, whatever one thinks of RFK, he's raised an important issue here. And we have a Pentagon which is completely oblivious to what the Chinese are doing. And you're absolutely right. Xi Jinping deliberately spread coronavirus beyond China's borders once there was a breakout in Chinese society. He lied about contagiousness. He knew it was highly transmissible human to human, but told the world it was not. And while he was locking down his own country, he was pressuring others to take arrivals from China without restrictions. Put those things together, and it shows that the spread of the disease, which killed 7 million people outside of China, was deliberate.
Yeah. I lay a lot of the blame on the United States, not just this administration, but going back for many administrations. This building of China had been allowed to happen. President Trump did come in and start to push back a little bit, but this is decades in the making. But still, now we have an administration that completely talks of China as, oh, we're just in a competition and all of these things. I want you to listen to Congressman Mike Turner talking about this administration in relation to China and get your response.
And you do see a pattern of really an uncoordinated policy by the Biden administration in responding to Chinese threats. As they've increased espionage against our country, as you've seen their support for Russia in violation of sanctions on Ukraine. Have you seen, hacking and other activities that they've done where there's been a self-declared adversary? Not only do you not see the Biden administration rise up to address these issues, you see, Janet Yellen, the treasurer of the United States, meeting her counterpart in China and bowing.
Gordon Chang, do you blame Joe Biden for allowing something like this to happen, an unauthorized biolab in the United States allegedly tied to China?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's look at the police stations. We learned about an unofficial Chinese police station in Chinatown, not from the Biden administration, but from Safeguard Defenders, a Spanish-based NGO. And then there was New York Post reporting. We didn't hear about that from the FBI or the Justice Department. And by the way, there are at least 7, maybe 9 other Chinese police stations on American soil operating at this moment, and we don't hear anything from the Biden administration about it. Well, it's the same thing with these biolabs. The FBI is silent. They are investigating what happened in Fresno, but they're not telling the American people what's going on. And remember, we got all of these Chinese saboteurs crossing our border, which means that those saboteurs can link up with these biological weapons labs that are in the U.S.
Gordon, last question for you real quick. You've wrote about it. We're covering it on this program, but there's only really been a smattering of coverage of this. Are you surprised that this is not the lead story everywhere?
Well, Grant, this is just a story that people don't want to talk about in the Biden administration because they're so busy trying, as Congressman Turner talked about, establishing these channels of communication. So, of course, they're not going to warn the American people of real threats posed by China.
Yeah. Sadly, though, the media has an obligation, too. They don't need to just go blindly following the Biden administration, but we know that's exactly what they do, sadly. Gordon Chang, it's always good to see you, my friend. I appreciate you coming on tonight and weighing in on this topic.
Well, thank you so much, Grant, because this is a critical topic at a critical time.
Yes, it is. And I really do think that the United States need to do a good job of decoupling from the CCP and China and really take the fight to them economically. That would go a very, very long way in cutting the CCP's strength off. All right, folks, the Supreme Court, that's right, I said the Supreme Court, could upend hundreds of J6 cases, including President Trump's. I will get to that as a J6 prisoner from prison joins us next.
Sad day for America, and it was also very sad driving through Washington, D.C. and seeing the filth and the decay and all broken buildings and walls and the graffiti. This is not the place that I left. It's a very sad thing to see it. When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent.
Well, folks, that, of course, is President Trump after pleading not guilty to these 4 charges. Now, President Trump pled not guilty to the latest set of 4 charges leveled against him by this deranged, freedom-hating special prosecutor Jack Smith. One of those charges involves obstruction of an official proceeding. This charge isn't new to the weaponized DOJ. 316 January 6 defendants have been charged with the same crime, but now one of those defendants, Jake Lang, is asking the Supreme Court to reconsider that charge. The argument is it is being far too broadly applied to Jake's case and then to the 315 others. If the Supreme Court agrees and throws out that obstruction charge, it upends hundreds of cases filed, tried, and of course convicted, including President Trump's case too. Well, joining me now from jail in Washington, D.C., is J6er Jake Lang was brought this suit, along with his attorney, Stephen Metcalf. Jake, Stephen, welcome to you both. Jake, I want to start with you. You've been in prison now. Is it over 900 days and still no trial, Jake?
Yeah, it's been, Grant, thanks for having me on. It's been quite the wild ride, 930 days by the time my trial's set, which could get pushed back because of the Supreme Court filing. It'll be over 1,000 days as a political prisoner right here in America without a trial. It's a travesty of justice. It's unconstitutional and it's abhorrent.
Yeah, so much for a speedy trial. Stephen, I want to ask you, when it comes to this case and obstruction, you say it's too broadly applied. Jack Smith has a history of broadly applying charges, but tell me why. Explain this for me.
So when you look at the actual language in the statute was specifically created for the destruction or obstruction of documents or a specific proceeding. And I use the word document specifically because that's what the statute calls for. And in 2018, well before anything happened with January 6th, Bill Barr at the time wrote a memo specifically stating, do not over-apply this statute. This is exactly what it's supposed to apply to. And these are the crimes that they're supposed to, these charges are supposed to actually go to. And that is not what has happened in January 6th.
All right, Jake, I've asked you this before. You go to the Capitol on January 6th. Was it to overthrow the government?
No, we were there to protect the Constitution. Me and about 1 million other unarmed, red-blooded, liberty-loving Americans came to defend the Constitution from a communist coup d'etat. Joe Biden is being installed as a puppet leader, bought and paid for by China, and we're there to say the will of the American people is for a recount. We need a recount. We were there unarmed, peaceful. The Gestapo of the Congress, the Capitol Police, murdered 4 unarmed American citizens, bludgeoned and maimed and brutalized hundreds and hundreds of others, and I'm one of those people. People died in front of me. Roseanne Boylan died in my arms. It was a day in American history where free men stood up to do the right thing, and the Washington, D.C. swamp came down on us like crazy, and now for the last 2.5 years, you've really seen the true nature of the swamp, that they will do anything at all costs to destroy President Trump and all his supporters.
All right. So, Stephen, it's interesting listening to Jake talk, because what I hear in him and every other J6er I've talked to is a sincerity about protecting the Constitution and a sincerity about going up and exercising their First Amendment rights, nothing more than that. The obstruction clause basically says you have to corruptly alter or destroy a document in order to obstruct this official proceeding. Corruptly, meaning with malice. That doesn't seem to happen here. Does this play into your argument?
Absolutely, Greg. That's why the D.C. Circuit Court is split 3 different ways as to how to define the word corruptly under this statute. So you have 3 different brilliant legal minds who cannot even come to the same terms as to what corruptly means with regards to 1512 counts.
So there's this issue of destroying a document. I mean, clearly Jake and the others weren't in there destroying documents, but it does go on to say obstructs, influences, or impedes an official proceeding. But clearly the goal would be to influence the proceeding if you don't want them to accept the thing, which then would be unconstitutional, because there's nothing wrong with voicing your concerns to the body of Congress that is supposed to represent you. Of course you're going to try to influence Congress.
And that's how one judge
100%.
Stephen first, and then Jake.
That's how one of the 3 judges in the circuit has interpreted the word corruptly under this statute. And that's exactly what this petition in front of the Supreme Court sets forward. The first big argument on Edward Jacob Lang's Supreme Court writ goes specifically to what you're speaking about, Grant.
Jake, let me ask you, you've been in there 930-something days now, you said. And this is just an outrage to me. Now you hear that your case could go to the Supreme Court. They haven't agreed to take it up yet. What is your message to the members of the Supreme Court if they were watching tonight, Jake?
My message directly to them is that this is way bigger than January 6th. This is way bigger than the 1512 charge. This is about the corrupt and misapplied law, that they are weaponizing a law code, bending it and twisting it. Biden's regime, his Department of Justice, and this FBI will use any law code to go after their political opponents because they want to steal the election in 2024 just like they did in 2020. So if I'm speaking to Supreme Court, I'm asking them, do the right thing, listen to the voice of God, because if you don't find this case properly, if you do not rule on this case properly, you're opening up a door to destruction where we turn into a banana republic. The current political party goes after, persecutes, threatens, and imprisons all of the former the supporters and the former leader of the other political party. That's the earmark to a complete banana republic and, these autocratic regimes. So this is really about restoring the balance and the healthiness to America's political and legal structure here, where it's not just an attack, one political party attacking the last one. It's really just, we need to restore health to our discourse here in America. If not, we're going to really see ourselves slip down a very slippery slope we're not going to come back from anytime soon.
Well, that's the truth. Stephen, one of the things that I've tried to do, and I think we have some video of this, I've tried to cover the January 6th event like not many mainstream media outlets do. You see the surveillance footage from inside. Most people were not doing anything. I called it an unorganized tour of the Capitol. In many respects, it became an organized tour of the Capitol because you had Capitol police officers actually escorting people
you have
through here.
1 minute remaining.
It didn't seem like obstruction. So I'm going to get back to that with you because I hear Jake has 1 minute left from the federal prison that he is in right now.
Okay.
Jake, last word. Go ahead, sum it up for me.
We lost them.
All right, well, that's okay. Just Stephen, as you see on the screen there, people walking through, is this used to go to the Supreme Court, or is that a separate argument?
That, in my opinion, that's a completely separate argument. I just came back from a 5-month trial, Proud Boy leadership case. I represented Dominic Pizzola. I was actually the only one who was acquitted of seditious conspiracy. And those images that you just showed were broadcasted for weeks for the jury. And I think that that's a little bit of a separate argument with regard to the 15, how to interpret the language of that statute and how that statute applies.
Lastly, I believe the statute, from what I talked about influencing, you're still allowed to exercise your First Amendment, the entire statute may be unconstitutional. Is that something that the Supreme Court could rule on?
On the overbroad argument, if they find that to be how this is applying, then yes, essentially the statute can be found unconstitutional because it does not put any defendant or defense or the defense attorneys on notice as to what it actually you can be criminally responsible for. And that was an argument we made down at the lower court about lack of notice. And that lack of notice component with the overbroad application of this statute can in the future lead to this statute being unconstitutional.
Yeah. Well, look, you've got 316 defendants charged with this obstruction of an official proceeding. This is chilling when it comes to free speech and gathering before your government and a right to exercise your grievances to that government. Absolutely chilling. And I would hope the Supreme Court would see that, and maybe the way it's shaped up right now, it just might. Give our best to Jake Lang. They cut him off the prison phone system. We figured that would probably happen. But Stephen Metcalf, I appreciate you taking this case all the way to the Supreme Court. It's not just Jake. It's a lot of lives at stake here. Thank you, Stephen.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Absolutely. All right, folks, you can see that's tyranny, right? That's an out-of-control government that's using obstruction of a proceeding when they're trying to overthrow a government with no weapons. Come on, nobody with any common sense would think that's going on. And yet here you have a government that charged 316 people, many of them in prison, like Jake, 930 days with no trial yet. That's wrong. That's a political prisoner. So what do you do to protect yourselves? Because they'll come after your finances. They'll come after your freedom. They'll come after your finances. They'll come after you any way they can. Protect yourself with gold today. How about that for a switch into this, right? Birch Gold can help you. My friends over there are all about a portfolio protection move. Birch Gold has stood the test of time, along with gold as a commodity, as an inflation hedge, as a privacy move, as a security move. It pays to put some money into gold. How do you do it? It's really, really easy. My friends at Birch Gold have made it easy. All you have to do is text America to the number 989898. That's America to the number 989898, and let my friends at Birch Gold help you. All right, coming up, folks, Jack Smith, this deranged prosecutor, continuing his attack on our republic by charging Donald Trump again with more ridiculous crimes. But Smith has wrongly charged a politician before. We will have that man on before. Next, stick around. Welcome back, everyone. Do you remember when the IRS was targeting conservatives, that Lois Lerner, who can forget her name, going after Tea Party groups and the like? You know who was behind that? This deranged, fanatical prosecutor, Jack Smith, was behind that. He gave her the go-ahead on all of that. Then you remember when John Edwards was charged. That charge ultimately got overturned. Jack Smith was on that, and he botched the case against Menendez. This guy has a long history of screwing cases up and really being overzealous with them. The worst thing a prosecutor can do is look for a victory instead of justice. You want to search for justice no matter where the facts take you. That's what the justice system is about. It's not what Jack Smith is about. You want to hear what this indictment is about? Listen to former Assistant U.S. Attorney Andy McCarthy.
The case comes down, can he prove that Trump believed
the things that he was saying, notwithstanding all the evidence to the contrary. But even if he could get over that hurdle, which I think is daunting, I do think that you have the problem that he has extravagantly stretch these statutes in order to try to capture this behavior. And that's because this is really a proxy for what should have been a political impeachment process. They're leaving to the criminal justice system the failure of Congress to carry out a successful impeachment.
Oh, wait a second. It was an impeachment process. This is double jeopardy. President Trump escaped that. You can't be charged with the same crime twice. That's a defense in all of this. But Jack Smith urged the American people to read this indictment, all 45 pages. I did. You know what I'm urging people to read? I'm urging people to read the Supreme Court decision that threw out a case that Jack Smith brought against then Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell, bribery charges that the Supreme Court said was a boundless interpretation of the federal bribery statute. 8-0. The Supreme Court overturned this conviction. Well, joining me now is the man who knows what it's like to be falsely charged by Jack Smith, former governor of Virginia. Bob McDonnell is with us. Governor, it's great to see you again. It's been a long time, my friend, from that old network. We won't mention it, but welcome to this one.
Okay. Thank you, Grant. Good to be on.
Well, what do you think of Jack Smith, Governor?
I think it's more of the same. You know, when he was head of the public integrity section from 2010 to 2015, Grant, you just laid out the cases that he was involved with, from the Lois Lerner advice to target conservatives, John Edwards, Bob Menendez, my case. So I think he's not political in the sense that it's just conservatives, but he's had bipartisan, high-profile cases where I think he was overzealous, overreached, and I think he just would rather win than get the law right. You know, federal prosecutors have a very unique duty. I'm a lawyer. I've been attorney general, prosecutor, and you're supposed to seek truth and justice, not merely to convict. And I think that's where Mr. Smith may have fallen down. You know, great pedigree, Harvard, and good record early on in his career, but he goes after people with truly boundless interpretations, stretching the law to get a win, and that is flat wrong. That's why my case was unanimously reversed. You know, when Clarence Thomas and Ruth Bader Ginsburg all agree that the prosecutor was wrong, I think that says something. I think, you know, in this case, with these new 4 charges on January 6th, I think even if he's able to prove the facts in that indictment, Grant, I'm not sure he can get 12 people to agree that there were 3 conspiracies. Who are the co-conspirators, and where's the case law to support this conduct? I think he's got an uphill battle.
When you were going through this, I would imagine you had to be thinking the same way President Trump is thinking, is what in the world's going on? I'm innocent of all of this stuff, and they're coming at me. What was that like? And did you ever sit down with Jack Smith during this entire process? Did they interview you? What was he like?
You know, we had my law firms, 2 of the best in the world, Jones Day and Holland, and I sat down with all the local prosecutors and asked for a meeting with the Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder. He would not meet with us, but we'd meet with the number 2 person and talked about the case and gave the 40-page brief on why they were completely wrong on the law. And why the things I did were routine courtesies to business people, setting up meetings, speaking good about Virginia companies. I mean, that's what I did for thousands of people. Yeah. And yet they persisted. And this indictment would not have gone forward, though, without Jack Smith, the head of the public integrity section, approving it. So I just think that the balanced interpretation is a good summary. I had the five former White House counsel, every president from Reagan to Obama, 83 former attorneys general of the states, all filing briefs in advance saying this is wrong, and yet they go forward. So I think his judgment is just bad, Grant.
Yeah, you know, I looked into some of your case, and the gifts that you had gotten were all reported. They were approved.
Illegal under Virginia law.
Illegal under Virginia law, and he still went after you. I'm going to play a clip from Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is what she says about Jack Smith, and I'd like to get your reaction.
Terrible attorney. He has a lot of failures in his career. but he is abusing his power, the power of the special counsel and the Department of Justice, and he will be doing this all for political reasons. It's all about the January 6th lie, Jack, and we know the truth.
So those are tough words for to be called of a prosecutor, a terrible attorney and abusing his power.
You know, after spending $28 million, which of course I'll never pay in my lifetime, and 3.5 years of hell for my state, my family, my cabinet, it was a lot to go through that. You know, thank God I'm doing well and have new things to do in my life. But you know, the power of a prosecutor. Justice Breyer called it an oral argument. He called them virtually uncontrollable. The separation of powers between the executive branch, the prosecutors, and the legislative branch shouldn't be crossed. And that's what Justice Breyer believed Jack Smith was doing by charging me in this case. Ordinary acts that you do for business people could catch up any political figure. So I would say, you know, in the Florida documents case, if Jack Smith can actually prove everything he's alleged, I think President Trump may have some criminal responsibility. But with the January 6 charges, 3 conspiracies and an obstruction, I think even if he can prove his facts, I don't know that it rises to the level with your free speech offenses and the other things. Grant, I don't think he can win the case.
What's your message to President Trump?
Well, listen, he knows better than anybody what the facts are, just like I did. I knew early on that I was innocent, and I had faith in God and the American justice system that it was going to be okay. And I think the American people and the jurors that are going to be sitting on that have an innate sense of fairness. And when you have 3 jury trials that are going on in the year you're running for re-election, when you're the likely standard bearer from your party, and you have the president's son, Hillary Clinton, with very suspicious conduct that aren't charged, I think there's going to be a lot of jurors on that panel that are going to say, this just isn't fair, and you didn't prove it, and you're not guilty. So yeah. I'd say stand strong.
He would hope so. The problem is this jury's in D.C. We've seen what's happened to a lot of the Sixers. They got really sent up the river, but you would hope so. I hope these cases get thrown out long before it ever gets there. But Governor Bob McConnell, former governor of Virginia, it is great to have a program. Really good to see you again, too, sir.
Thanks, Grant.
Thank you for coming on tonight.
Sorry, sure, I'm on vacation, but nice to be on with you.
You got it, Governor. Thank you so much, and no problem. You know, I told my producer, Governor McDonald, he said, I'm not going to have a suit because I'm on vacation. He always was in a suit and tie on TV. I said, don't worry about it. We're happy to have him on. All right, Devin Archer revealed some more about the Biden crime family yesterday. That's next. Stick with me. right, folks, we'll get to Devin Archer's interview with Tucker Carlson in just a minute. But first, I've got to talk to you about Field of Greens. You know I love them, fieldofgreens.com. Use the promo code GRANT, of course. You've heard me talk about this before, but you likely don't know the fascinating backstory of how Field of Greens came about. My guest is Miles Grimard, founder and CEO of Brickhouse Nutrition, the brain behind the group that inspired scientific visionaries to create a product I depend upon now for my health, and I really do. Miles, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Grant. Appreciate having me on.
So, it's interesting because I watch all the other networks. A lot of the conservative outlets have other nutritional supplements on. I'm like, oh boy, here we go again, Field of Greens, and you guys call me. I start using it. I love it. But what sets you all apart from the others?
The main thing is how it's made. I mean, from the get-go, you can see on the label it says Nutrition Facts Panel as opposed to Supplement Facts Panel. So I mean, it's actually real food, and the nation classifies it as such. And then what you see on TV a lot of times is companies that will use extracts, which they oftentimes are fine products, but you lose all the value and nutritional contents when you put it into a lab and try to extract out certain things and call it blueberries. There's a difference of extracting out the nutrients of blueberry versus actually taking a blueberry like we do and we'll desiccate it, which is a process where we take the blueberries, we freeze dry, crush them up into a powder, and we add that along with many other things.
You didn't just take all the fruits and vegetables and throw them in there. You chose specific ones, correct? How was that process to make sure that it's just right?
I know you guys, your audience has heard from Dr. Kim before. So he's the brains behind how to choose each specific one. So they do come from around the world, made in America, but he chose each specific fruit and vegetable for the effect that it will have on your body. So something that comes from Australia might not be the same thing that comes from South America. Everything that he chose is the best that we could source. And then it goes through the same process of getting it down into a food and a powder. So the difference of ours, again, is your whole family can take it. It's really just fruits and vegetables that will affect your body in every way. So it'll have heart health, skin health, hair health. I heard you mention with Dr. Kim, it gives you energy. Some fruits and vegetables will do that as well. Sometimes just because people don't have enough fruits and vegetables in their life. So the initial pump of having one scoop of Field of Greens, it just, whoa, that feels good.
So my brother-in-law, who I've got now on Field of Greens, before he started taking it, said to me, he goes, how do you know it's working? My answer was like super simple. I'm like, well, I have more energy and I feel better. I can legitimately feel better. Sometimes not that long after I drink Field of Greens. What's your answer to how you know it's working?
My answer also comes from Dr. Kim, which is if you go to your doctor and he's going to say, all right, you need some work. And then the next time you go to your doctor after you've been taking Field of Greens for a while, and we actually have this guarantee, if he doesn't say, oh, you're much better, you're much healthier, then we do have a 100% money back guarantee. I'm actually happy you brought that up. That's one of our guarantees we provide.
And then the flavoring, is it different things in each Field of Greens, or is it just a different flavor in the same product?
So, for example, our strawberry lemonade, which has been going crazy, we just recently launched that one. That one, it's because of the certain products that are already in it. It already has like a citrusy flavor to it. So we just add a lot more strawberry. And so it does change it a little bit. Our original it's sweetened with the one extract we have is organic stevia from the stevia leaf. But then we also have a raw, which I absolutely hate, but some people love it. But then so each one it changes a little bit. And we know that each person, they can't really help it. Everybody has a different flavor palette. Some people like licorice, some people don't, some people. Yeah. So every flavor that we come out with, it should target a different demographic.
Well, I'll tell you what, it really is great stuff, and I'm not just telling you that. I'm using it every day now, sometimes in the afternoon, just to give me a little boost. Miles Grimard, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your support, too, of Real America's Voice and this show, Stinchfield, and thank you, sir.
We can't thank you and your audience enough. You guys have been absolutely amazing to us.
Absolutely. Thanks, well, we appreciate you. You got it. So remember, folks, thanks to Miles, we got you 15% discount. All right. So visit fieldofgreens.com. Use the promo code GRANT. OK, again, it's fieldofgreens.com, promo code Grant. You see that interview with Devin Archer that Tucker Carlson had? What do you think of Devin Archer here? Roll it.
What were the specific skills that he brought to clients?
Well, at the end of the day, he had a career in Washington.
Yeah.
Graduated Yale Law School, had a very big network in D.C., and brought that know-how and understanding of D.C. and ultimately the brand.
The know-how. So as far as I could tell, he wasn't doing legal work. Correct. He wasn't in the counsel's office at Burisma, right?
No.
You know what my takeaway is from this interview? It's got nothing to do with Devin Archer. It's got to do with Tucker Carlson. The man may be bigger than Fox News. Tucker Carlson can do this and it gets wild publicity because he's good at what he does. Literally, I think he's bigger than Fox News. Devin Archer, of course, Hunter Biden's one of his best friends, his business partner, now goes in front of Congress and testifies about the Biden band and the pay-to-play scheme and Joe Biden's involvement in all of this on the phone 20 times. He laid it out about how this all worked. Cut to.
The initial idea around the business that they were going to provide, the government insight and an additional network to raise capital and then, deal with regulatory issues that you might have at the corporate level.
Right. Regulatory issues.
Exactly.
Okay. So that would be more his area.
Right. That would be his space.
Right. But did he have a sophisticated understanding of regulation, do you think?
I think they led a team that had a sophisticated...
Okay.
No, now remember, that's supposed to be Hunter's former best friend, basically saying Hunter is an idiot, okay? And remember the Chinese executive that basically said Hunter was as stupid as his dog in an email. That's what the Chinese executive spelled out, so you get your answer there about whether Hunter was instrumental in dealing through this regulatory process. I think we have one more time. Cut the roll it.
Washington's not a money town.
Right.
People aren't in business in Washington for the part, and most people don't have business skills that I've noticed in 30 years of living there. So really the business of Washington is selling access. That's what it looked like to me.
Yes.
Not just on Biden, but
I think that's one of the core misconceptions. It seems like when understanding a regulatory environment means selling access at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's how I interpret it. And I think that's how most people in Wall Street, whether they admit it or not, interpret it.
Look, it's not just Washington, D.C. Access is everything. I don't care what city you live in. Access to City Hall is important. Access to business leaders is important. Access to money is important. The banking industry. This is how America works. But it's also about opportunity. And when you sell that access to someone who had great opportunity, like being vice president of the United States, that's where it becomes totally illegal. Tucker's point, it's no coincidence that the wealthiest counties in the United States surround Washington, D.C., and there's no business being done there. It's all about access, money, and power. Government business. That's not real business. That's government business. Folks, a thief in New York gets justice handed to him. I cannot wait to show you this video. It's not by the police, that justice is by that guy. That's next.
Here are some of the headlines we are featuring today from your favorite news outlets at offpress.com. Today in Washington, police are bracing for former President Donald Trump's return to face new election interference charges in federal court. He is expected to make a court appearance at 4 p.m., get fingerprinted, and then leave. Security has been increased due to concerns over protests and the media crush. On the campaign trail, we might get a look at the future of both parties soon. That's because Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis has agreed to debate California's Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom. The White House has asked Facebook to censor conservative critics like Tomi Lahren and promote more positive stories about Joe Biden from the New York Times. And Super Bowl great Tom Brady is joining the soccer frenzy with a minority in the Birmingham City team in England. For stories like these and more updates all day long from your favorite news outlets, go to offthepress.com.
Folks, I'm going to put this video up. It had been shot at any liberal city out there. I was told it was New York City. Then on the radio today, my co-host said it's California. We think here at Real Voice it's New York, but it really doesn't matter. The point is, people think you can shoplift until you meet the guys at this 7-Eleven. Watch.
Ain't nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do, man. Until you call police.
Stop playing. No.
Ain't nothing you can do, man. Until police come on.
Move. Watch out, my
Hey, don't. Hey.
Watch out, boy.
Ain't nothing you can do, man. Don't do that. Don't do that, man. Don't do that.
I'll tell you what. I love it. That's what he deserves, because the police in these liberal cities are not doing anything because their hands are handcuffed by City Hall. And so that guy, put him back up. You got to have him on the screen here. Come on. That guy is getting an old-fashioned beatdown, and he deserves it. You think he just scoops cigarettes into a garbage can and walk off? Not in that 7-Eleven. Those guys are heroes, by the way. Now watch. They'll probably be charged by some deranged prosecutor. That would be sickening. It's going to do it for us, folks. I'm Grant Stinchfield. Stinchfield's Army Rolls. See you here tomorrow.
Just stop talking. Just please, begging you. No. 8 o'clock. Real America's Voice, live from Studio 6B. I mean, Delgado's sitting here telling me